Howdy, folks. Happy Wednesday. Happy hump day. We are here. We have things to discuss. I have the Finland-Slovakia game on in the corner of my eye, so I'm splitting. But anyway, we'll just ignore that.
Get it together, Michael.
Let's try that one again.
Yeah. Let me pull out my knife again.
That's an all-timer there, one. That was an all-time scene. Again! This is twice. That's it. I'm calling the cops. That's it.
It's a letter opener. It's not a knife.
Doesn't matter.
I have Lead Ford Stiletto playing in the background now.
Sharp items in a threatening manner. Sharp items in threatening manner. I don't care. I am
right through the Zoom, right through the StreamYard call. It's going to work.
Yeah, Russ, start us off with the pre-show and get us off of this.
All right. So, anybody watching these bowl games? I think they've created even more now. It's unbelievable. It seems like there's a bowl game on every 10 minutes. I laughed because there was one yesterday. I had one on in the background for a couple of minutes today, and once I saw somebody laid out in the field, I was like, you know what? I just can't. But there was one yesterday in Orlando. It was the Cheez-It Bowl.
Yes.
Yep. And
which is great. Which is great. Any bowl that is named after something you can actually put into a bowl, I'm on board with.
Right.
So you were watching the Tostitos Bowl also then?
Absolutely.
But the Cheez-It Bowl just seemed to fit Orlando's sensibilities. And so I just felt like that was a match made in heaven there.
Absolutely.
But I believe the winning coach got doused with Cheez-Its from his team.
I mean, that would have been awesome.
Did it happen? Did it happen? Did they actually seriously
I think so.
Oh, that's way better than Gatorade.
Yeah, that's better.
It's like found gold. All of a sudden, you're like walking around your hoodies. Oh, look, Cheez-It.
I mean, because really, there's not anybody on earth that doesn't eat Cheez-Its.
Yeah, I was thinking, I would prefer the Ritz toasted chips bowl.
Only this freaking guy. Seriously, I mean, you and the 85-year-old ladies that shop that aisle eat that. Like, I just don't.
Wegmans?
It's damn good. Okay.
Wait, so you're trying to tell me you would eat that over a Cheez-It?
Yes, I hate Cheez-Its.
Oh my god!
White cheddar Cheez-Its are like the best.
I hate.
Well, I love white cheddar Cheez-Its.
Now, to your,
I don't even know what to say, man.
To your point, Russ. Hi,
guys.
To your point,
hey.
You guys are sounding funky to me. Weird.
Well, hold on a second. We're in the midst of pre-show here, and Russ. The University of Buffalo only lost one game this year. They're not exactly a football power, but they got into a bowl. But I missed the game. I didn't even know that they played. And it was something called the Camilla Bowl. What the F is that?
Was that from like Camilla Parker Bowls? Did she sponsor the bowl?
There you go. You got it.
Well, maybe she smoked a bowl, but I don't know about that.
No, I actually totally think that you fell for a joke there, Mike.
Yeah, it's the Frito-Lay Camellia Bowl, Camellia Bowl, and they beat Marshall in a thrilling 17-10 game.
I mean, Marshall's been good for some points in their lifetime, but so really it's the Frito-Lay part. I don't know what that other name attached to it is.
My team gets to get smoked on Friday, so
by who?
I'm gonna go check. Yeah,
Alabama.
Oh yeah, they're going to get destroyed.
Yes.
You have to see what Trevor Lawrence did to them.
Yeah. I mean, again, if you want to talk about how bizarrely stupid they did the college football this year with the bowls and the championship, from what I understand, look, and I don't follow it, Notre Dame shouldn't even be there. But they have a TV audience, so they're there.
Well, they were undefeated until they lost to Clemson, and they'd beaten Clemson. So,
yeah, I mean,
without Lawrence, but
honestly,
just a little butt there.
It's funny because of the four major sports and then the two major events in terms of college sports, which is college football and college basketball. The one I care about the least is college football. I just don't watch it. I don't have a team.
You're not in it, but again, it also, I think, in many cases comes down to where you're from. And again, Philadelphia, not a hotbed for college football, major hotbed for college basketball.
Yeah,
I always
Temple,
feel that exactly. Temple, you got the Big Five. So you always have that interest level here in Philly. Whereas, again, It's the suburban areas that are more into Penn State, and things of that sort, and that's probably about it. So college.
Not tell you though, Anthony, because I'm in New York. There's really no. I mean, unless you're watching Columbia football, which
there's no team in New York. That's why there's a lot of Notre Dame fans
in the Northeast corridor, with the exception of, let's say, Boston College, who was occasionally in the mix. Northeast corridor is tough. I mean, other than you get Penn State, and Penn State tends to get a lot of people from New York as well, who go down there.
College basketball. New York City had arguably the most important of the pre-tournaments. They always had the NIT, but that was the second level tournament. But they always had the Big East tournament at MSG. And other than St. John's being in the part of the Big East in the 80s, does Hofstra or does any of those smaller colleges?
Hofstra had 1 year when Speedy Claxton was there. They were actually a good team and made a run. You also had, which was big also, which I went to once, was the ECAC Holiday Festival, which was around a little before, around Thanksgiving, Christmas time. And they always had, I got to see St. John's, Carolina play when Mullen was there and Wennington was there and Jordan was there and Perkins. So that was a great tournament they had in New York that went on. And college basketball was always big in New York. I mean, obviously years ago with CCNY and obviously before the scandal in the 50s, but well before I was born, but it was big college basketball for a while. And then when Mullen got there and you had the Big East, and that was right in the beginning of the Big East, that became one of the premier conferences until I can't even tell you it was in the Big East anymore because they've mucked all that up.
Yeah, and arguably the greatest college basketball player of all time, Lou Alcindor, who turned out to be Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, went to high school in New York, and instead of going to a New York college or a college close to home, he went to UCLA and went to play with Wooten, which you can't blame him because they were power. But still, there's other than like Syracuse every once in a while, and that Syracuse in New York City, that's a 4-hour drive. It's not exactly a local college, so.
No, but it was the Big East when Dick Abbott ended up taking it over and making it into a huge conference.
I do know a lot of Syracuse fans because a lot of people from Long Island did go to Syracuse.
You had Pearl Washington, you had Mullen, you had Seton Hall was really good. I mean, you had obviously Georgetown with Thompson and Ewing. So that conference was tremendous to watch.
Well, let's get to Eck because he's driving or something.
Well,
I think with the hat.
He's a
I was going to say, judging from arm positions here, he's not driving.
That's true. Unless he's in England.
Eck is doing his impression of the inside of the Abacab cover with the Phil Collins hat.
The Abacab cover? Yeah, I can see that. No, it's just funny because my audio is stuttering, but they say I looked it up and they say it's a problem it'll fix in a few minutes. So I don't know. So I'm hearing you guys in and out right now, but we'll see what happens.
Well, okay. I mean, are you close to home?
Okay. I sound okay.
Yeah, your video's fine.
Yeah. Are you close to home, Eck, or
getting there? Half hour still. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's get what you want to talk to off the top before your reception.
Yeah, definitely. We'll start here. I do have something to talk about off the top, but I think it's really interesting.
Okay, go ahead.
I'll let you decide.
Go ahead. Yeah, we'll do the intro here.
It's the 30th, right? Yeah, it's sure. It's Wednesday. We'll call it
Wednesday the 30th. That's correct.
Sure, let's go with that. Sounds good. All right, ready?
Mm-hmm.
Hello, Hockey World. Whoops, computer's flashing up to me. Oh, that. Hello, Hockey World. It is Wednesday, December 30th, 2020.
I'm Michael Lagello, and I'm eating Ritz toasted chips.
I'm Jan Levine, and I don't care what Michael Lagello's eating.
I'm Anthony Mingioni, and white cheddar Cheez-Its for the win.
Rough coming from Sportsology. I don't even get Mike.
I understand what's happening here. I'm Eklund. At HockeyBuzzcast and HockeyBuzz.com. This is the podcast comes every Monday through Friday. Filling the comings and goings in the hockey world today from Lincoln Drive, the famous Lincoln Drive in Philadelphia, which is really hairy. And if I vomit at any moment, you'll know why. My wife's doing a good job driving here, but
that'll boost ratings.
It is Lincoln Drive. There's nothing you can do on this road. So anyway, there you have it. So anyway, I wanted to touch base with something because I had a really interesting discussion last night with an NHL executive, and we've talked about this before. They talked about tanking and different things like that. And, what it's worth, to make it go for a season, to do well in a season, everything like that. And I've talked to people before, and I always was under the impression that the teams really don't do that. Like they really internally they really want to win, and they obviously they know. They're realistic, but usually
X is frozen to me.
Yeah. I'll text him and say his video locked up.
Okay.
Well, okay. Let's okay, you froze there after a minute, so just start over.
Sorry. So anyway, I'll start over. Okay, so
okay.
Essentially, no.
Russ, do you want to text him and say he's freezing up?
Yeah, I'll text him.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Hopefully we can clear this up before if that gets back in the next few minutes or in the second half of the show. Let's start with the World Junior. There were some pretty decent games last night.
Finally.
Yeah. I honestly, again, I don't mean to be a buzzkill, but I do it so well.
You never.
Honestly, I think this tournament, not just the 16-2 game or the 11-0 game, it really hasn't had a lot of drama to it. There's been some good performances, some good individual performances, but I didn't think that the games, were particularly interesting. Maybe the German game where Stützle really impressed was a pretty decent.
Russia US was probably a pretty interesting game also. I mean, that was a close game to the end. It was a 1-goal game until they got the empty netter late.
Of course, the Czech Republic upset of Russia was fascinating. Just from, after seeing the Czech Republic getting dismantled the game before against Sweden, and then coming in and managing to defeat a Russian team that looked like it was hitting all cylinders early on, and then for them to be able to shut them out was a huge surprise, I think, for most of us.
Yeah, so, I find redeeming value in all of them in the sense that for as long as it's tight, for as long as the play is good, I'm taking notes on players. I'm keeping an eye on players for the draft, players that are drafted. Sure, when it gets out of hand, the U.S. game got to 6-0. That Caulfield goal, that's why I couldn't even give him credit really for the goal, because nobody was playing any kind of defense at that point. They were sort of beaten down. And that's, and that's just what happens in the tournament. It's not just because it's a COVID year either. This happens all the time in your play.
In the preliminary games, it always seems to be having this kind of an issue, and that's where the discussion point has always been with regards to the World Juniors. Is everybody's basically like, "Yep, I'll start to really pay attention once we get to the knockout rounds."
Right.
Because that's how they look at it as the big boys. And it's unfortunate, but it is indicative of, as we've said on previous shows, and as we've discussed obviously also on Off the Post Radio, is that it's a pattern that has been completely indicative of the tournament, and it's something that do you shrink the competition? I don't think you do that, because again, I think those other countries have just as much right to be there.
They do.
And those players, in some cases, it's exposure. Again, teams already have scouts on the ground, but especially this year, may not as much. So it was really important, I think we all would say that Austria, as bad as Austria may have played and as tough as it's been for Germany, those players need to have eyeballs on them.
Yeah, but Germany did finally win a game once their goalie was back, and I believe if they were at full strength, they actually could have gone further than people thought, but we'll never know that.
Well, it clearly is. Part of the thing is, there are teams like Austria who obviously are not up to some of the talent of the other teams, but it clearly is matchups, because you have a situation like the U.S. playing the Czechs, and like we said before, the Czechs beat the Russians 2-0, and then the U.S. beats the Czechs 7-0. So obviously the U.S. matchup and what the Czechs did against the Russians to shut them down didn't work against the U.S. Although it was early on, it was like a 0-0 game, and then the U.S. finally fought through, got a goal, and then the sort of the everything opened up for the U.S. We have Act back. Let's see if this works.
I'm gonna try to just go off of the audio, see if this works.
Yeah,
better.
sure.
Better.
Yeah. So okay. You were talking to somebody.
I was talking to somebody at an NHL team, and about should guys, I hear you guys might be interested in signing Sammy Vatanen, and the thought was, okay, this is a team that they've been in the rumors. I had I'm just trying to find out what's going on with Sammy Vatanen essentially. Today word comes out maybe Vancouver, whatever. So he's one of the more interesting responses I've ever gotten from a team person, saying like, yeah, we should be signing him, but you know what, it's not going to help us. And I said, why? He said, well, we're losing money no matter what we do. Okay, obviously it's everybody's in that boat. He says, yeah, and if we win more games, we lose more money. If we get further, we lose more money. So the thought is, like if I'm going to sign a guy like that, if I got to put out $3 million, $4 million, that's just out the window money. Where if I can get through the season somehow, I'm okay. We won't lose as much money, and even making the playoffs, that we lose more money. And obviously, there's a future aspect to this where you have to look into it and say, okay, we want to keep the team excited, people excited about the team, and so that when you can eventually put fans in the back in the arena, they will. But it was a really it was a sombering call. For all the things that's happened, I've never really heard anybody from the league be that dark about it. If that makes any sense, it really was interesting.
It does. I mean, you're down from 80 again. We're down from 82 games to 56.
Yeah,
majority of teams not having any bums in the seats.
Right.
As we know, we're not going to have anybody in the seats. So from a business perspective, yeah, sure. In a regular year, when you've got that revenue, when you got that income stream coming in, you probably go out and get a Sammy Vatanen based off of what he's probably looking for and what he deserves in a normal year.
Right.
But we're not having
that. But here he is, and now, he knows, all these don't kid yourself that everybody who works in NHL teams or, GMs, assistant GMs and the likes, highly competitive people. I mean, to where they get to, they're all about competing. They're all about winning. They're all about doing whatever they can. They're not tank type people at all. It's not in their vocabulary. They understand, the benefits of high draft picks. But in this situation, it almost like he was telling me, we're not tanking, but if I sign anybody and bring in, and we have to pay extra money, we have players that we're already paying money to that are younger. Let's just pay them, see what happens, and and give them the opportunity.
Well,
then we're not going to make more money.
The motivation in a normal year for a guy like Vatanen, for a team that's missing one or two defensemen, say, okay, if I add this piece, we're making the top 16, we're making the playoffs. Okay, and normally that equates out to $1 million to $2 million per game at home, based on gate. Well, more than likely in May, when the playoffs start, it's still not going to be anywhere. It might be 25%. It might be nothing. It may be no plan. So the motivation, the financial motivation there to recoup your money is not there, because you're probably not going to have fans in the seats. And if you're signing a guy like Vatanen, if you're a team that is not going to make the playoffs, like say New Jersey or Ottawa or somebody like that, to flip him for a draft pick doesn't make any sense, because you're going to pay $2 to $3 million prorated to get a draft pick. It's not worth this year when you're losing tons of money. Right. So
the problem I see for Rotten and Eck is we see the phrase kicking the tires, and literally, so I'm sure every team is calling now to see what the lowest price he'll accept is. And that's where it's at. It has nothing to do with his talent anymore.
Yep. No, you're right. It doesn't. And it's unfortunate for him. Obviously, as a player, he doesn't have actual physical tires to kick, but he's I do think that it's and if you do kick his tires, he's a player who does have some injuries in his background, so I'm sure that teams are nervous about that part of it too, and putting any money into that, but what's really interesting, I think we're going to have a little bit of a tiered situation in the league this year, of teams that think they can go for it. I think teams that are actually like what we're seeing with St. Louis, okay, they're going out bringing in Hoffman, maybe. They're bringing him in for sure now, but whether or not they sign him or not, that's definitely a move where they're gonna lose money. I don't think anyone's gonna be in St. Louis for the games as of the start of the season or what have you. But they have a potential to win.
I think that's another reason why Ottawa has done what they've done, because they're probably thinking, look, this is a fluky year. It's a short season. Why can't we do something that people don't expect?
Which we discussed last show, right? They made these moves with the potential that, hey, it's a win-win any way we look at it, because if we get on a tear, we've got players now that have a good history, that have had playoff experience and fill needs. But if it doesn't work out, these are players that are likely contending teams are going to want and give us a decent and give us something decent for it.
I mean, Jan, it doesn't behoove Ottawa to basically be a sacrificial lamb to the 6 other Canadian teams by adding veteran guys like Coburn, like Stepan. They added Erica Branson during the offseason. They're providing their young group some veteran leadership, so they won't get trounced. Now, they could surprise people. They have enough talent there that if Brady Tkachuk has a great year and Shabbat has a great year and Matt Murray bounces back, that they could be competitive for a playoff spot. But in the end, I think what they're doing is we're just trying not to get our young core killed by some of these teams who are powerhouses in the North Division, and they had to get to the cap floor anyway, so why not do it? And then they also could sell these guys at the deadline.
Right, and in addition, as you talked about, more importantly, they provide a veteran leadership in the room. Guys like Stepan, guys like Mark Stahl. Sorry, not Stepan, not Stahl, but Stepan's a guy who's probably going to be a mentor to Tkachuk and other guys that are on this team. And then, as you said, I think the key piece is the ability to sell those assets at the deadline and recoup. Look, they basically netted they got rid of a second rounder, got back a second rounder in terms of all their trades. And in terms of getting some guys that you can move at the deadline, even if they get third rounders with supplementing all the other picks that they have, they're in a win-win position. And even if fans are not in the building, which we expect them not to be, at least initially, it's not going to have a material impact on them because they're probably not going to make any kind of playoff run. But if they do start to play relatively exciting hockey and people can show up, then they get the benefit of bringing some fans in the seats and then moving them for additional assets. And the young kids have the ability to learn and then step up after the trade deadline, even though the deadline is relatively closer to what we normally have to the end of the season than in years past.
Now, I did hear one thing that and I don't know whether it sounds okay. Is that okay now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, so I did hear one thing. When they bring in Matt Murray, obviously, who's a goalie, who's a good goalie, who's been around winning teams, that they did actually talk to him, and he was told that they were going to make these kind of moves, that they were going to go out there and make the team more competitive. That they were willing to do that right away, even though they realize they're not necessarily, going to be a cup contender right away. They are going to be aggressive. So I think part of this is, part of they had planned to be aggressive for a while, and I think that this is part of this is what we're seeing now.
Yeah, but they're sort of being aggressive with a hand towards being not ridiculous, because all these guys, Stepan, Coburn, Paquette, and Goodbranson, all 1 year left in their contracts. So they're not locking themselves into things. They're not taking on 3 or 4 years of a contract. It's 1 year. So they get to the situation where they're over the cap floor, under the cap ceiling. They've added players. They can move them out at the end of the year if they're not competitive. If they are competitive, they don't have a long-term commitment to them, and they buy time. You're not forcing Drake Batherson or some of the other youngsters that they have into the lineup, Russ. They can be patient with those guys and let the veterans play.
Yeah, they definitely can do that, and I think they will do some of that. And like I said, I think Stützle is going to get in there too. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I mean, you just don't know. I mean, we look at it and say, yeah, it's unlikely that everything happens and they all gel right away. But they got a goalie now, and who's to say it can't? And that's the thing. I think we will see some fluky results with some teams. I think some of the cream will rise to the top, but I also think that some of the teams now that are getting beset with all these injuries that we weren't expecting to hear maybe 2 weeks before camp opens, there's a little bit of trouble for some teams.
Now, Ack, I mean, a team like New Jersey, it was announced yesterday that Nico Hischier was injured at some point getting ready for training camp, and he's not going to start camp with the Devils. And this is a team that, I mean, most people were probably picking 7th or 8th in that East Division, and losing one of your top forwards to start the year isn't getting off on the right foot. So it's like, I mean, with a short schedule, a team like New Jersey, even though they have 2 top picks, so all overall picks in Hischier and in Jack Hughes, a team like Chicago, who's been decimated by injuries with Nylander and Dotch and now Jonathan Taves, it might be the prudent move to say, okay, not come out and say we're tanking, but just, okay, you're going to try, but you're not good enough. And this is the year where get in the lottery. It's less painful because it's a much shorter season and there are no fans. I think this is the year that some teams will do this.
It's tough for teams because they think about, like you got like Tom Fitzgerald's a new GM there, and he wants to make a good impression. You've got other new GMs around the league that want to make good impression. When you got a new GM, when you're new, you want to make a good impression. Zito in Florida is another one, right? These are brand new GMs that want to make a good impression, but how are they going to do it? How are they going to go about it if they can't? If they don't have all the tools to their abilities. I think that what you're going to see a little bit of a difference, I think, between teams that are going for it and teams that aren't going for it. I do think it'll be interesting to see some of the younger players involved as well, and you get to see some players who usually wouldn't play in the NHL right away, and that could be good or that could be bad. I mean, we've seen recently that players seem to be able to jump into the NHL quicker than they've ever have before. Mm-hmm. But also at the same time, there are some players who have definitely been messed up by it, and we've seen that as well. So I think that part of things is going to be fascinating to watch. Now, I know Hoffman, and I just talked to somebody yesterday about this. New Jersey actually was one of the teams talking to Hoffman the most right before we went to St. Louis. And apparently, obviously Hoffman wants to go someplace where he can win. But he also, New Jersey also has a lot to offer him as far as different situations. He can play more. And apparently, they even had Patrick Elias, I was told, contact Hoffman and talk to him about it. Apparently, for some reason, I don't know. You never know what players look up to other players, but Hoffman and Elias have a relationship of some kind. He looks up to Elias. So there's a lot of that stuff still going on behind the scenes. New Jersey still thinks they're going to get somebody. Now I think with her,
they could have gotten Hoffman if they offered him a multi-year deal with decent money, and they obviously were trying to play the market against it and keep the price low, and that's why they didn't get him.
Russ, they tried. I mean, from what I was told, they spent 3 years.
But what is the AAV? They may have given him 3 years, but they probably didn't give him the AAV he wanted.
I get the feeling though, like probably in the last month, these players. Maybe a month ago, maybe in early November, a month into free agency, they were still looking for that long-term deal.
Yeah,
I get the feeling now that everybody is in sort of Taylor Hall mode.
They're looking for total panic mode right now, Mike. To be honest, I mean, is there?
Oh yeah, no, I get that, and then to see you taking $1 million too, I think is a panic move. But what I'm saying, Ek, is that. Players are now looking for, maybe they're looking for any place they can find a job, but I think guys like Hoffman, guys like Travis Hamonic and Vatanen, they're probably looking for 1-year deals in scenarios that will accentuate their positives, that'll give them like good point totals. I mean, okay, Taylor Hall came to Buffalo because Kruger was here, but he also came here probably with the promise he's going to play with Jack Eichel. And Jack Eichel was interviewed today.
Yeah, for sure.
And why wouldn't you, if you're going to try to entice Taylor Hall to stay?
Right.
You play him, and you want Jack, and you want Jack to be happy too.
Well, I
going forward.
Anthony, I think the only way he stays is if they find somebody to take Jeff Skinner's contract, and I don't think that that's going to be possible. So I think this is a one-and-done situation. But if you look at it from Hall's perspective, okay, I'm playing with Eichel. I could score 50 goals, or not 50 goals, but prorated to 56 games. He could score 30 to 35 and go into free agency with that year on his books and saying, okay, everybody give me $8.5 million times 5 years.
The other. Sorry, Mike.
But here's the thing about that, right? Like, the thing about that. Go ahead. You go ahead.
No, finish that out, Ek. I got another player to mention.
Yeah.
No, because the thing about that is this. I mean, if Taylor Hall scores a 50-goal prorated, percentage somewhere, games or whatever you're talking about,
right? You're breaking up again, Ek. Well, okay, let's say this. Maybe because of the situation financially in the league, going into an 82-game season for the first time in 3 years, maybe there will still be some hesitancy, from NHL managers to give a winger big money on big term. That's always possible. But I feel safe to say that if Taylor Hall stays healthy in Buffalo and he scores, say, 30 to 35 goals with Jack Eichel, that teams looking for scoring will be lining up for him, because next year there's not really a ton of quality free agents on the market. That's why some of these players, that's why Hall signed a 1-year deal. That's why, guys like Tyson Barrie signed a 1-year deal, and probably why Hamonic and why Vatanen will sign 1-year deals. I mean, Russ, I was making the thing, because there were people complaining why the Leafs signed TJ Brody for a 4-year deal of $5 million, and then you go forward 2 months later, and Vatanen and Hamonic, who are right-hand shooting, right-handed defensemen who could could have provided a comparable upgrade to what Tyson Berry was. And they're saying, well, the Leafs gave him 4 years at $5 million. Nobody in their right mind thought Sammy Vatanen and Hamonic would be out there on December 30th.
No, I mean, that's true. And I'm going to add Zdeno Chara to it because it's rumored now that the Bruins are after Ben Hutton, who's a left-handed shot. And if they get him, that's pretty much it for Chara. And Chara at this point, my guess is he's probably looking in the Northeast. And, it wouldn't shock me where he ends up now. Like, he's literally a wild card that any team could fit in if he feels like taking a lesser salary. So we're going to probably be shocked where he ends up.
Philadelphia, New York.
Real quick, we have some breaking news. The AHL has announced, basically their intention to start the 2021 season on February 5th. They've approved the Board of Governors has approved the structural framework for an AHL season that will start on February 5th.
So they didn't change the date.
Nope.
Now, the question is whether they're going to follow the NHL model and the 4 Canadian AHL franchises, Laval, Belleville, Toronto, and Manitoba, will only play against each other in a northern division. I would think that that's going to be the case because if they cross the border, there's going to be a at least 7-day quarantine. So you're going to have these teams. Now, this is good news. This is really good news for, you're going to have taxi squads, but you're also going to have your players at least playing games and developing instead of just withering on the vine.
We're hoping.
Again, that's the intention. Again, that's the Board of Governors approving the structural framework. Based off of in the press release right now that I'm reading here. Details are still being worked out, but this steps allows our teams and our NHL partners to better determine their plans for the coming season. We look forward to dropping the puck on February 5th.
That depends also when camps actually open, because you would assume players who might go down to the AHL will likely remain with their teams on taxi squads at least for a week or two after the season starts and then migrate over to those other teams. But part of it's going to depend on how many goalie spots are going to be available, how many goalies are going to keep, especially with a lot of the ECHL teams not playing. That's going to create havoc in terms of space for some AHL squads.
Now, it does seem to me like the way they worded that the NHL is going to kick in a little bit more than usual to keep that league afloat. But I also think there'll be teams that won't be playing. I'm pretty sure we're going to hear about teams that just say, we can't do it.
Yeah, just like in the ECHL, 9 teams opted out. I'm sure there might be NHL teams that do. But here's the interesting thing. We talked about taxi squads yesterday. So now, if you have an AHL season, if you have an AHL club, and use Buffalo as an example and use Toronto as an example. Jack Quinn, their first-round pick this year, he's 18 or 19. Dylan Cousins is 19. Otherwise, he wouldn't be playing in the World Junior. Mm-hmm. Either one of them can play in Rochester, but they can be on the taxi squad. So more than likely, since there is no CHL and we don't know whether they're going to resume play, at least for the next month or so, after they're done with the World Juniors, they're going to probably go to training camp with the Sabres, and they'll probably be part of the taxi squad.
I do wonder, though, if there's going to be at least a potential understanding because of the circumstances.
It doesn't seem like it. It seems like this is the understanding is the taxi squad.
If it has to be the taxi squad, then it's the taxi squad. But again, the key thing is making sure that the players keep their legs moving in some form in this.
Yeah, I don't think the taxi squad's going to last for some, though, because I don't think Buffalo is going to go through an entire season with those two guys if there is no OHL to say, hey, that's 4 dead spots on the roster on there if you never bring them up to the NHL. Now, Cousins might come up. Jack Quinn's not going to play.
But then that begs the question. Yeah. Do they just because of the circumstance for this year, if those other leagues do not play, you can't have those players dying on the vine. They for one season for this circumstance allow those players to play in the American League.
I don't think it's going to happen, but it did happen during the lockout. But that was a lockout.
That's what I'm saying. But you are basically
it's reasonable. I just don't think
reasonable, and it's a natural occurrence.
Is that
a lockout? They're being locked out because of COVID.
Is that up to the CHL, or is it an agreement?
It's part of the agreement. There has to be some sort of an agreement between them. They have to work that out.
Yeah, you would think
that's probably why things are going to be at least a month or so. They probably have to negotiate that point. It's something I probably may want to discuss a little bit with people at that level.
As long as the CHL is in limbo and has not made a decision.
If they know that they're not going to play,
then they may waive it. But
that's what I'm saying. That if you can't have those players dying on the vine for
right, but getting them to admit it will be hard because the Q already plans on playing. So that would screw up that plan because they already have a framework for playoffs and everything. And just because the OHL and the WHL don't, doesn't mean...
but that makes, again, the problem there is, Russ, just because the Q made their decision their way and those other leagues decide not to play, that's completely unfair to the prospects who are on those OHL
I get it, but
and WHL rosters. If they don't play, they need to be on an AHL roster.
But it might
the taxi squad.
I don't know if you're going to be able to do that because they may end up with a couple.
Then they're doing it half-ass.
Yeah, and that's probably what's going to happen.
Because the agreement is between the CHL and the American Hockey League.
You create a special exemption for the 2021 for this part of the 2021 season.
But as long as you could say, as long as the Q is having a regular season, their players under the age of 20,
right? And then you may hear from the Q players are not going to be happy about that because that prevents them from getting into an NHL contract later. So that's where you could potentially have a hairy issue. But at the end of the day, this is the world we're in right now. This is a situation where nothing's perfect, but you got to make it such where everybody has the opportunity to play. You can't have those players in the queue playing, keeping their legs going in a competition, and the OHL and WHL players are basically stuck dying on the vine.
I agree, but you would think the NHL had already thought this through and would have at least mentioned something when they brought in their whole return to play here thing again, and they didn't. So that's what makes me think it's going to be a harder sell now because all of a sudden they're going to have to do that last minute.
But again, you also have one other thing. I'm sorry, Jen. There's one other thing. Again, if the NHL now is having some level of potential, again, based on how this was worded in the quote that's in the press release that we're all seeing, maybe the NHL has a little bit more involvement in this than we think.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, it behooves the NHL to have their developmental players playing someplace. So if it's not in junior, then it's in the American Hockey League. So it seems reasonable, but Russ is right. What is reasonable and what actually happens are two completely different things.
I completely agree. And again, we're all worried about a half-ass way of doing this, and you hope the NHL
it also depends who's under contract as well, right? That's kind of a key driver, right? So that, I mean, part of that has to be a factor here, and this is what we talked about. If the AHL hadn't gone this direction, we thought that there might be games or intra-squad, quote-unquote, games that existed between them. Now with having an AHL, guys who are under contract can play. You always had guys that you could bring up at least for a 4 or 5 game PTO type of deal, and they now have to extend that as a 1-year option for guys and see if they can basically make expanded the rosters that way. It's not an ideal situation. I'm hoping there's been discussions behind the scenes because the expression of it's getting late early. I mean, February 5th, that means you have to open camps probably 2 weeks to 10 days before that, which means you need to get everything in a row, especially based upon players maybe having to quarantine depending on where they're coming back from.
Right. I mean,
I just think the PA would have knocked all this out if they could have. There probably was, and it might be the teams. There might have been the teams that balked at it because they don't want to pay these guys.
I mean, American Hockey League players who, if you look at some of the rosters that were announced for some of the teams that are opening up this week, we know the NHL, the 24 teams that made the playoffs are opening up on January 3rd. Like the Sabres, they had 35 players on their training camp roster. So, and obviously it's a 23-man roster. So you're only talking about a dozen players who are probably either bound going back to Europe or bound for the American Hockey League if the American Hockey League stays. But this just adds a bunch of complexity when it comes to the taxi squads because, like, say for example, most teams, the third goaltender is going to be somebody who clears waivers. And now, if he goes to the taxi squad, he's practicing with the NHL team, but he's not seeing game action. If he's waived and he goes to the American Hockey League, he's playing he's playing a regular schedule. What would you rather have, a goaltender that's just facing, your extra guys taking shots, or would you rather have him in game action? I would think that if you're the Sabres, you want Dustin Tokarski playing with the Amherst. If you're the Leafs, you want Aaron Dell or Michael Hutchinson playing with the Marlies. But then they also have Joseph Wall and Ian Scott, so they have 4 goalies they need to get.
Right. What they're going to do, Mike, is the lower guys on the development scale are the ones that are going to play in the AHL, and the ones with NHL experience are the ones that are not going to play, and they're just going to be practicing because they're used to it. Right. That's how they're going to do it.
Yeah.
Well, that makes sense because most of those guys have been NHL backups and they're used to not playing it for days and weeks on end. So
but the other thing, Mike, and we can't underestimate this because, again, with jobs that were lost in the front offices, we don't know how many of those are coming back for people just because the season starts. Right. Because if you don't have to sell tickets and those other things, that does eliminate a lot of jobs. There are probably teams that don't want to pay for some of their ELC guys an AHL salary while they sit on the taxi squad.
And Randy brings up a big Flamester brings up a big point here. Calgary, Edmonton, and Vancouver. Vancouver's AHL team is in Utica. The Flames and Oilers, I believe it's Bakersfield, and they're both Northern California.
And no, I thought the Flames. No,
it used to be Abbotsford, but now
it was Abbotsford, but they're
in Northern California. So
Stockton,
the Stockton piece, that's right. So, the taxi squads for them are going to be extremely important because they're not going to be able to get their players. If they call up somebody from Stockton or Bakersfield, it's going to be a 7-day wait for them to quarantine.
Yeah, I think the AHL will have these regional pockets, and teams that are sort of outliers that don't have 2 or 3 teams that could play are probably going to back out for this season. I think that's what's going to probably happen.
Okay. Just going back to the World Junior here for a minute here because
I actually had some stats I wanted to mention.
Yeah, the point I was trying to make was yesterday I thought the games were better, but if you look at the scores, 7-0 US, 10-0 Canada over Switzerland, 7-1 Russia over Austria. Other than the Czech game against the Russians, other than Germany beating Slovakia 4-3, these games really have not been extremely exciting. Now they'll get better as it gets into the quarterfinals and into the medal round, but usually there's some 1 or 2 barn burners. And this year, Russ, it just really hasn't happened.
No, it's true, but I mean, again, we go back to the Czechs. They have Lukáš Parik. He's a terrific goalie. That's a hell of a find for the Kings, and he has definitely kept them in games. But the coach, I was on for the coach the other day, and even though the U.S. beat them by that score, they were in the game for a while, and he talked about when the game turned. But in his mind, it's like, hey, we were there, and then this happened, and then you know what? Now the game turned, and that's what happened. And so I think that's the way a lot of the European coaches are taking it. But here's some interesting stats. So for Austria, Sebastian Reinschitz has faced 133 shots. He still has almost a 90% save percentage. That's pretty good. I mean, if you think about it, for the amount of shots he's faced, Devin Levi's only faced 42 shots, and he's got a 95%. Parik has faced 60, and he has very little defense. Otherwise, his save percentage would be better. Knight's only faced 34. I mean, so... And he had that bad game and got replaced, so his save percentage isn't great. But there's a lot of shots for a lot of these teams. It's just a couple of superpowers that aren't. But again, some of these teams feel like, hey, if my goaltender gets hot and we play this dreaded style of defensive hockey that we all hate to watch, and it works, we could sneak out a win or two. And that's what we've seen. And the only team that's not playing that way is Germany, because they do have some high-powered offensive players. And now that they have their goalie back, they don't have to play that way, but the others do.
Now, we referenced Rick Dollawall's report about Sami Vatanen, that the Canucks are kicking tires on him. And you have to – right now the Canucks are $2 million over the cap. That does not include probably – sending probably Eriksson down to the taxi squad to save $1 million, or Sven Barchi, the same thing. So they would clear a couple million and get cap compliant at that point. But unless they have somebody like Jay Beagle or Furland, Furland is the one. Furland is probably going on LTIR. So with that, they could open up enough space to maybe sign a Vatanen for a couple million a year. But yeah. I don't know. Like, that's the thing. I think that these players, I think Hamonic wants to still get paid. I think Vatanen still wants to get paid. They just want to get paid on a 1-year deal so they can basically do a reset and say next July, I'm going to hit the market again. And when people might be more willing to spend money at that point.
Yeah, I mean, you said it the right way. I mean, they're hoping the market expands, right? This year we saw, the forwards, it wasn't a great market to begin with. The only players who really did get paid to a certain extent was defensemen we saw with Pietrangelo and Krug. I mean, the forwards are all, I won't say all of them, for the majority of them were looking for jobs late into free agency. Next year with a weak class, you could argue that maybe guys will get paid. I mean, Vatanen was one of those guys who was injured last year, coming off an injury, played relatively okay once he finally got back, but also got hurt again, and that probably depressed his market price. So, the hope that it's going to pick up next year, I would think part of it is he needs to prove that he can actually remain healthy in order to be able to get a longer-term deal, because guys aren't going to be willing to pay him based upon the recent history that we've seen out of him.
Yeah.
All right, so our buddy Chris Peters, who worked for ESPN, did what he does almost every year, which is a ranking of the top 100 prospects. And it's always interesting to look at this. And obviously, there's always criteria that makes the list adjust a little bit. And his criteria was, players who qualify for Rookie of the Year, meaning if they played over 27 games, if they played 27 games or more in their NHL career to this point, they're not eligible for Rookie of the Year. So a guy like Rasmus Sandin, who came up in January last year after Morgan Riley got hurt, he played enough games that he would have qualified for Rookie of the Year. So he's not on the list. But if he was on the list, I think he'd probably be in the top 15 to 20 like he was last year. But so just looking at the list, and I'll read off like in sections of 5 here and just see what you guys think, throwing it out. Alexis Lafreniere is number 1, the top pick from this year's draft. It's the top 3 are the top 3 from the 2020 draft, which I quibble with because
with that.
I think players who are more experienced, who don't have NHL, who haven't played in the NHL, meaning players who have either played a couple years of junior or players who played internationally.
Like yesterday, I was going to bring up Kaprizov, right? So he has scored last 2 seasons 33 and 30 goals. Probably going to translate to at least 25 goals and probably at least 55 points.
Right.
That's not to say Lafreniere can't get that, but he has to get a lot of opportunity to do it. Right. I think Kaprizov has the inside track on that because he's going to be first line, first power play. He's going to get every opportunity.
Right. The top 4 on this list are the top 4 from the 2020 draft: Lafreniere, Byfield, Stützle, and Lucas Raymond, with Kaprizov being number 5. I think Kaprizov should be higher for what you just said.
And I would have Byfield lower because I think he's going to be third line center. And again, third line center, probably second power play. Maybe they'll put him on the first power play, but probably second to start. Like, I don't know if he's getting the same kind of opportunity as some of the other guys you may mention after 5.
Right. 6 through 10, Dylan Cousins from the Sabres, Trevor Zegras from Anaheim, Yaroslav Askarov from the Predators, Moritz Seider from Detroit, and Igor Shesterkin 10th.
The only guy I would change there is Zegras because the team isn't great. He will get a lot of opportunity. And if he comes in hot like he is from the World Juniors, that's, like I told people, I think he's moved ahead of Turcotte as a player, and I used to think Turcotte was a little better, but Turcotte's better overall. Now it's just turns.
And we may also, and one other thing we may see here is that again, the fact that he has also been playing that he's playing on the wing may also showcase him to make a roster spot with the LA Kings. For as much as criticism as we may have leveled at Team USA for putting him on the wing when he's a centerman, it would make far more. Again, if he's going to try to make the Kings roster out of the gate.
The Ducks.
I'm sorry. No, I apologize.
But I agree with you. You're right. But again, it's a good list. That's the only reason I would have Zegras higher.
And Sam Constantino on Hockey Central today was, Zegras is having a really good tournament right now, but the only thing he questions is his strength and him being able to translate what he's doing right now at the junior level to the NHL level, where he's going to be facing, facing Cole.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I get that, but Zegras has been playing against really good top players in his age group for a while now. And if nothing else, we've seen you hang around the crease, even against these Czech teams. Bobby Brink got knocked down 2 or 3 times in the crease. You're taking a pounding too in these games. So I don't think it's that far-fetched to say Zegras can't handle it.
It's not far-fetched, but I would say you do need to see kind of where he's at. And again, for all of us, especially who have watched prospects over the years, it's always best to be, I think, on the conservative side. And the final, and let's face it, if that player is showing out, the last frontier that we always talk about is, can you physically handle it? And it's not a small thing to say. In terms of skills and everything else, there is a physical toll again when you're playing against men versus boys. But even if you have guys in his own age group.
And Jan,
it happened last year with Kakko, right? Take a look at Kakko when he first showed up in camp to when he came back from after the pandemic and forced separation. It was like 2 different people you were looking at, right? Guys get in the weight room to get their professional training. Look, what Zegras has that may be standing out above everybody else is the vision and the passing ability that sets him apart from everybody else. And that is transferable regardless of what level you're playing at.
Yeah.
And he's also been able to train at BU with them not playing. He was probably in the weight room for months and months and months because they haven't played yet. So that's probably something that we don't even know what that's going to look like. We see what it looks like against the junior players. So that's something that could help him too.
Now, Jan, what I'll be curious about is with Shesterkin, with the 56-game schedule, with the fact that, a lot of these series are going to, they're going to be playing teams back-to-back on back-to-back nights. There are scheduling situations where they've carved out extra days in between the games, but there are situations where I think they did that because of potential positives and they have to push back 24 or 48 hours to be able to test everybody. But how many games is Shesterkin of the 56 going to play? Is Georgiev going to play, say, 25 and Shesterkin plays 31 or something like that? What do you think?
I think there's, if I remember correctly, the Rangers have 6 or 7 back-to-backs, if I remember. And part of it clearly will depend on where they stand in the standings at the point in time where they're playing those games. My view is you're probably looking at a 60-40, 65-35, probably more likely kind of a split between the two of them. So of the 56 games, figure he starts, let's say 32-24, somewhere in that range, maybe a little bit more of a spread, maybe like 35-19, 35-21 maybe. Something like that is probably what I'm thinking of in terms of.
Yeah, that makes sense. I go for that last one.
I mean, if he's on a roll and he's hot,
sure,
wouldn't preclude me from seeing Quinn go with the hot goalie, especially if there's not back-to-backs or depending on who the back-to-backs are against, right? It's a big difference if you're playing Philly and another big squad versus, let's say, you're playing, I hate to say it, Buffalo, which is a little bit different of a squad, may alter his perception in terms of who's going to go with in the nets and also where they are in terms of the standings at that point in time.
I mean, the one positive is he probably played back-to-backs in the KHL all the time, where in the NHL they're a little more conservative about it. So that's a positive.
Yep.
Okay, continuing with the list, 11 through 15, Cole Perfetti from Winnipeg, Barrett Hayton from Arizona, Nick Robertson from the Leafs, Cole Caulfield for Montreal, and Bowen Byram for Colorado. Now,
see, I would flip-flop Byram and Caulfield for sure. I would because I think right now Caulfield is still showing that he's not giving us all he has yet. And that's probably because of the physical part. That's probably just for whatever reason, it's taken him a little while to mature. He's having an okay tournament, but I did write an article where I would move him off the top line because even though he scored the 6th goal the other day, he's not producing. Or second line. He's not producing the way you would expect Cole Caulfield to produce. So Bowen Byram is ready to produce at the NHL level.
Yeah.
He's just
my view on this, Russ, is if I'm playing Caulfield and I'm bringing him up to Montreal, I'm putting him on a line with a guy like Tatar or somebody else who can handle the physical play to free him up a little bit, knowing that he's got somebody to have his back in case he needs it.
Yeah, I mean, they could do that after the college season. I don't think they're going to do it this year because I think they're probably seeing the same things I'm seeing at the World Juniors and saying, let's let him develop a little more. Now, he could play in the AHL. That's something where he turns pro. He could do that, and maybe they'll go that route.
Yeah, and I mean, physically, the guy who would fit with him would be Kotkaniemi, but Kotkaniemi I don't think has the requisite playmaking ability to get the puck to Caulfield enough times to make it beneficial. I think Suzuki or Tatar.
You put Suzuki at the center with Tatar and Caulfield, right? Because Tatar can do the dirty work a little bit, right? Freeing up the skill set of Suzuki. And Suzuki showed last year he's willing to go get dirty also down low if he has to, scoring a lot of goals in front of the net.
Yeah, and look, I mean, I get, also the upside of Caulfield, and we're gonna see it at some point. But I think honestly, for whatever reason, maybe because he played in the dub, people when they talk about Byram long term, I don't think they really realize how good he could be. I don't think they never talk about him in terms of being maybe just below a Makar or something like that. They seem to talk to him about him in lower terms than that. And I'm not sure why, because like we see it all happening, but it just seems to be the way it is.
I mean, this is a top 5 pick who's big, who's fast, who's got offensive ability. I mean, yeah, he's at worst, he's a top 4. At best, he's a top pairing. So, or just a few more here. 16 through 20, Alex Newhook, Colorado, Marco Rossi, Minnesota, Alexander Holtz, New Jersey, Gregory Denisenko, Florida, and Jake Sanderson, Ottawa.
Well, if you're looking for a sleeper in terms of a Calder Trophy guy, to me it's Denisenko. Just because I think he's kind of matured over the last couple of years. And without Hoffman there and without Dadonov there clearly is a need for another top 6 forward. Maybe he gets to play with Barkov and Huberdeau. If not, worse comes to worse, you figure he's going to get a realistic shot in the top 6 on the second line, and he's going to get a lot of power play time.
Yeah, I think with this list, they're looking at more of the future.
Yeah.
But you're right. He could be a Calder guy in the sense that he could surprise us. This part of the list I'm fine with, but I want to see who comes after Sanderson, really.
Okay. 21, Jamie Drysdale. 22.
That's my problem. You could stop right there. I am always going to put Jamie Drysdale ahead of Sanderson. We could see in the World Juniors who looks better, Jamie Drysdale. I get that it's easy to say Sanderson is X, Y, or Z, and he's a terrific player. But at the end of the day, if Drysdale gives you 3/4 of the defense you believe Sanderson's going to give you, Drysdale will beat him in points every single year of his career. And I think that's really the difference of the two. I think people just felt like Drysdale's skating maybe wasn't good enough, but it really is good. I'm not sure what the little nitpicky stuff is with Drysdale. Maybe it is just playing his own end, but it's really been good.
Yeah, I mean, I look at this and it's funny because
it's nitpicking, obviously.
Yeah, no, but and like the previous 5, I like Sanderson. I think he's going to be a good pro. I think Jan is right. I think Denisenko is a sort of a dark horse for the Calder. Yeah. Rossi and Holtz, I think, will be good NHLers, but I think they're a year or 2 away.
Yeah, I think Rossi is a little further away than maybe I'd hoped, but I could see. And look, it's hard to tell from this tournament because he's playing both ends of the ice. It's just in hockey, when you're one guy amongst the teams, like once you pass the puck, you may not get it back kind of thing. Right. It's hard. But I do think ultimately, even if he plays this year, he's not going to be gangbusters, and Holtz does look like he's close but not there yet either.
Right, but if you go further into the next group after Drysdale, Anton Lundell is clearly Finland's best player.
See, I would have him higher.
So would I, and Vasily Podkolzin has been great for Russia.
Yeah, now you could say Podkolzin's not going to be a high point guy, but he's going to do everything else, so you could say he's there because of that. I think Lundell has proved to the world now that he will be able to score more goals than most people thought, and he's got another 3 points today, and he's already excellent on defense. He's already a top-notch guy on faceoffs. Last time I looked, he was around 60% or so in this tournament, maybe even higher now. So, yeah, I would have Lundell a little higher.
I think Podkolzin's going to get – his stock's going to rise. I mean, I think last year he had a rough year, but I think what we've seen so far in the tournament this year has kind of, I think, restored his stock compared to where it was last year.
Alex Turcotte is at 24, and Alexander Romanov is at 25. Obviously, Romanov is very ballyhooed coming off the World Junior last year, and he signs with the Canadians. He's probably going to be on their bottom pairing to start because they have enough depth on defense.
Yeah, actually, Mike, you want to know what Lundell is now? He's moved up. He's number 2 in the tournament for faceoffs at 79.41%.
Yeah, and I know he had the first goal for Finland today, and he's got 2 assists on the other goal. So
yeah, I told people if he has an out in his contract, I think he could play right away.
Yeah, and so we'll just finish off the last few here. It's a list of 100. I recommend going to it on ESPN.
Yeah, this is great. I would definitely read it.
But 26 is Jack Quinn, and this is the only problem I have. I think Jack Quinn's going to be a really good pro, but when you have your own junior coach coaching you for Team Canada, and you're being yo-yoed up and down the line, like first line, then he's the 13th forward and not playing. That sends little signals to me, Ross. It doesn't.
It does, and I think we're looking at I think that's the player we're looking at for.
Hey guys, we have breaking news.
Go ahead.
Again, hold on a second. Let me make sure it's verified.
Well, while you're doing that, I'll just say this real quick. He's the guy that we're looking at for future benefit of strength and other things.
Yes.
Because he already has the shot and his skating's real good. So I think that's where that's at right now for Quinn.
Okay. Spencer Knight is at 27. And please, he had one bad game.
I know. People went way crazy over that. You know what his quote was? Before I wrote it on Sportsology, people want to read the article.
Guys, so assuming this is accurate, right, and assuming it's not a parody account,
okay.
Ken Campbell is reporting that Chara is about to sign the Capitals.
Say it again?
The Capitals, okay.
Zdeno Chara is about to sign with the Washington Capitals.
Yeah, like I said, I figured he'd stay Northeast, and it wouldn't shock me no matter what team he went to. The only thing I was going to say about Knight, and then we'll go back to Chara, the only thing I'd say about Knight is this. He basically said, look, I just went to the rink wanting to have fun, and that's what I did before the game against the Czechs. And he did. He had fun, and he shut him out.
Yeah.
Like, that's what he does. He is very able-bodied to wipe out what happened in a previous game. Now, as far as the Chara thing, it makes complete sense. I could see it happening because it's not like their blue line is that locked up that they can't have a spot for Chara. And, they probably gave him – the rumor was that Boston offered him $1.5 million. So did they have $2 million in cap space? Because if they did, he probably took it.
Yeah,
I'll find out.
It was Ken Campbell. It's because I follow him on Twitter. It was him that reported it. So
yeah, Ken's got sources. There's no question.
Yeah, and I'm just looking.
Here's my view on Knight, though. If Bobrovsky is not there, how much higher on the list would Spencer Knight be?
Oh, he'd be much higher.
Right. That's the problem. He's blocked. That's the only reason why he's down where he is.
Yeah, he might be a 2-year backup, and then they finally say, hey, look, Bob hasn't worked out here. We'll figure out what to do with it. But he might have to back up for a couple years starting next year.
Now, according to what we're showing, the Capital, they may be over the cap, but
they have 2 injured players, Kempny and Henrik Lundqvist.
Well, there you go.
Lundqvist's only $1.5 million.
No, but Kempny, so that's enough to give Chara
presuming he's on LTIR. Yes, that's enough.
Yeah, Kempny's a long-term injury, and he's making $2.5 million.
Right.
So that's $4
million. So you could slot him right into that slot, and they put Lundqvist is going to go out. But again, they also if Anderson ends up making the squad, they're going to have to pay him.
Probably Anderson and Chara
going down. So
probably only getting $1 million.
Yeah, probably league minimum for Anderson because. Yeah. That's probably that's why they put him on a PTO. It's like whatever we have left, Craig will give you that type of thing.
Yeah, I can see Chara getting right around 2, or he takes the 1. If he takes the 1.5, that will anger Bruins fans. But
that'll be one of those where he got tired of being played by the team to a certain extent and said, look, either you want me or you don't want me, and if you don't want me or you really don't know if you want me, I'm going to take my talent and go elsewhere. One
more thing we should bring up. I think Jan and I would be remiss if we didn't say, hey, Ryan Callahan saying that he's retired now. Look, people could say he only played until 35. Ryan Callahan was an undersized guy that took a beating in the crease, always was willing to go there, did everything for his team. Tampa kept him on the roster when he could barely play anymore because he was so good in the locker room. Eiserman loved him at the time.
Yeah,
I get it. He was a terrific player. For what he got out of his body, he got all he could, man.
Heart and soul guy, no doubt. And at end of a long and at the end of the career, an injury-plagued career, but a good, when he was healthy, a very good and feisty player. And
he was the epitome of the black and blue New York Rangers. If there was a poster boy for the John Tortorella perfect player, it was Ryan Callahan. All you need to know is the video the NHL posted today where he lost the stick, he tracked the guys, he blocked a shot from the point, dove to try to knock it out, stayed in the zone, blocked another shot, then going off the ice, hit a guy checking going off. That's the epitome of a Ryan Callahan shift.
Yeah. Tomorrow we'll discuss, where Chara fits in with the Capitals. I would think if he signed with them that he's probably going to be in their top 4. Otherwise, maybe that was the thing with the Bruins. Maybe the Bruins were saying we're going to transition away from you and you're going to play on the bottom pairing. And I don't think he would accept that from them.
I'll say this, and for the people in the chat room, there's some people that got there late. Yes, we talked about the AHL. Just go back and listen later. I'll just say it like this. It just seemed like in these negotiations, the Bruins were not really super interested in Chara. Like, based on the quotes and everything else, it just never seemed like they really wanted him to the point. I'll tell you what this felt like, Jan. This felt like with the Mets offering Strawberry that contract, kind of knowing he wasn't going to take it, but didn't want to take a beating in the press.
Oh, they did. They did anyway. I mean, well, it's funny. I mean, first of all, Strawberry admits it was the biggest mistake he ever made in his life was going out to L.A. On the flip side, the Mets not re-signing him was a huge miscalculation.
Yeah.
Well, let's just say this. I don't know whether it was by coincidence or purposeful that Chara signed with a team in the same division as the Boston Bruins that he will play against 8 times.
Well, if he's going to stay Northeast, there really wasn't much choice, right? I mean, he went to Columbus, maybe, but.
Yeah. Listen, I'll tell you one thing about Chara. He will not care. If he goes in and Marchand bothers him, he'll smash him. He doesn't care, man.
I can't wait.
We'll just lift him up and move him out of the way.
I can't wait because I want to see Chara punch Marchand in the face.
He's not a big puncher. Look, he's not a big puncher.
He punched John Tavares in the playoffs, so he did.
Yes, but that's in the playoffs. But again, if Marchand does try to get under his skin, he will shut that down. Yes. He will.
All right, we'll talk about that tomorrow. For the departed Anthony Mangione, for Jan Levine, for Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello. Thanks for watching, and remember, without the buzz, it's just